Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this event. Just before we start, I wanted to mention a few practical points. First of all, that this event is being recorded and you will all receive the link to the recording after the event. Then note that you are on mute and you cannot unmute yourselves, so please ask your questions via the questions box. There is a dedicated Q&A session in the second part of this event. We will also run several polls throughout the event to gather your opinions on the key topics discussed. And in the handout section, you will find a copy of the agenda and the speakers' bios. We will be tweeting live also during this event via our account, Orgalim EU, using the hashtag EUindustry. We invite you all to do the same and share your favorite quotes from this event. So thank you for your attention. I will now hand over to the moderator of this event, Malte Lohan.
Thank you, Georgiana, and a very warm welcome to all of you joining us this morning and participating in our event, enabling the next generation of global technology leaders. We have a lot of people from the industry joining us here today. Welcome to you from the EU institutions. You are very welcome. And we also have some guests joining from outside of Europe, from the US, from Russia, from China, from the Ukraine, from India. So particular welcome also to you. My name is Malte Lohan. I'm Director General of Orgalim, and I'm delighted to be your host this morning. What an exciting time it is for all of us who are following or part of the technology race. And we really want to get to the heart of that today. What does it mean to say we want to have global technology leadership? Can Europe even realistically expect to have it? And if so, in which areas? Does it matter? And then crucially, of course, what role will the European policy framework have to play? Now, many of you will know Orgalim. We are the European organization representing the mechanical, electrical, electronics, and metal technology sectors across Europe. That's all combined around a third of Europe's total industry. And our companies are making everything from advanced manufacturing equipment like industrial robots to the sensors that are used for automated connected mobility, to components for 5G, for smarter buildings and smarter energy grids. The 770,000 companies that constitute our industries include some big multinational players like Siemens, Bosch, or Schneider Electric, for example, but most of them are SMEs and even micro businesses. And they may not be household names, but often they are the hidden champions, absolute global leaders in their fields. And I'm excited that we will be hearing from both types of companies today. What they all have in common is the cutting-edge technologies that they make, which are at the heart of Europe's digital and climate transition. And in the context of our recovery from the pandemic, these technologies will be even more important to generate long-term growth and long-term competitiveness for Europe. Now, clearly, the subject today is extremely timely because we have the updated industrial strategy coming out next week. Our event today actually is part of a broader series, which we call Industrial Strategy in Focus. And over the past months, we've already been covering everything from Europe's trade strategy to the future AI regulations to the circular economy. You're warmly invited to join our next event on the future cybersecurity framework. More information on that is on our website. And I also invite you to sign up to our monthly newsletter if you want to stay in touch with our activities and our events. All of that is available on our website. Now, why is today's topic so important? This is a defining moment for European industry because a new industrial strategy is being forged for the EU as we speak. We already saw the release of the proposed AI regulation. We also saw a proposed new machinery regulation. Those two are of particular importance to our industries, and we will no doubt come back to them in the discussion. We already had earlier this year the new EU trade strategy. We have an ongoing discussion around using state aid and so-called important projects of common European interest. And bringing all of this together, next week will be a really big week, because next week finally is when the updated EU industrial strategy is set to be released on the 5th of May. And we are also expecting on the same day a proposal on tackling foreign subsidies that are often distorting the single market today. In all of this, there is a new approach in Brussels when it comes to industry and when it comes to technology. And this is these keywords like strategic autonomy, like technological sovereignty that I'm sure many of you have been seeing in the media. And of course, these are not as such new today. They were already part of the industrial strategy that the Commission put forward back in March 2020. And there are really two overarching drivers that are behind this. One is the EU's flagship policy goal, the Green Deal, and the path to becoming climate neutral and being the first continent to become climate neutral. And then there is the second key driver, which is Europe's place in this emerging superpower conflict between China and the US. In both of those, technology is at the core. So we clearly have a huge stake in the green and clean technology space, the role of smarter industries in allowing the transformation of Europe to become climate neutral, in making our cities smarter, our buildings smarter, and reducing the emissions across the industry in our manufacturing sectors. And then, of course, technological sovereignty is also about keeping Europe in the global top league when it comes to key technologies like microchips, 5G, cybersecurity, batteries, cloud, AI, you name it. We want to be a rule setter and not a rule taker in these fields. And the crisis of COVID-19 and the economic impact of the pandemic has really illustrated some of the weaknesses that Europe faces, both in terms of its political environment and also within the industry itself. No surprise that now we are talking about supply chain dependencies and supply chain vulnerabilities after we realized how fast our supply chains could be interrupted. And we're talking about industrial resilience in the face of a major economic crisis like we have just faced. And clearly, these are going to be key new topics in the updated industrial strategy. And we are even talking about new policy measures like reshoring or nearshoring that 2 years ago would have been politically toxic. Now, the crisis really is an opportunity to jumpstart Europe's economy and also jump forward into a new chapter of European industrial development. And of course, the immediate recovery plan from the crisis is not just about industry, it is about the entire fabric of society. But we cannot overstate how far-reaching the consequences are for industry and for technology in particular. At the heart of this, of course, is a massive new funding drive under the next 7-year budget, the MFF, and the Recovery Fund, including massive grants that the EU will give to the member states to kickstart their economies. And we have never seen a package of public financing at the European level on this scale. Very novel is not just the amount of money, but also the fact that this money is being coupled to some specific targets. And in particular, a part of those funds will have to go into green and digital initiatives. So governments will need to justify that they are using the money available for green and digital goals. And the Commission will be centrally overseeing these plans and validating these plans. And then the final part that is really new in this picture is the approach to managing the industry, the approach to industrial strategy, which is based on an ecosystems approach. Some of you may be familiar with this already and will have seen also this circle with the ecosystems that are being currently prioritized. And this is radically new because this is about the public sector at EU level and the national level taking a much harder look at specific parts of the industry where the state would want to play and need to play a bigger role going forward. Orgalim has been a big advocate of this approach, and especially of the recovery plan and the funding targets. And we have also welcomed the fresh thinking on an industrial strategy, including the role that ecosystems can play here. But it's no secret that we also have some serious concerns about parts of the discussion. And some of the instruments that are being considered sound to us essentially like old industrial strategy in a new packaging. It still comes down, at least sometimes, to the state picking winners and enacting more protectionist measures that are putting up walls around Europe against the other parts of the global economy. And for our technology industries with deep, complex global value chains, with thriving innovation ecosystems, this would be the wrong recipe. And we fear that would actually backfire in the long run in terms of weakening European industry and European innovation capacity. So we are really facing a once in a generation opportunity for Europe in the weeks and the months ahead, and an opportunity to reclaim leadership as a technology superpower in the fields that will matter tomorrow. We know that we are not satisfied with where we are today from the fields that matter today. We know other parts of the world have been much faster in claiming technology leadership in those areas, but in the technologies that will matter tomorrow, we have the chance to be at the top of the game. And because there is so much at stake for Europe and for our industries, we must be focused on thinking about the long term and the key technological and competitive drivers that will determine how all of Europe will be developing, not just particular sectors or particular ecosystems, but all of Europe together. And this brings me to one of the most important technological opportunities that we want to discuss today, and that I call as being critical for a new generation of industrial leaders. Because in all of this, we are seeing a massive opportunity for Europe, for Europe's industry, which is shared across all parts of the economy, and which is related to the very nature in which things are produced. Across the world, across all sectors, the nature of manufacturing is transforming fundamentally, with massive connection of the production value chain and digitalization of production processes, as well as breakthroughs in materials, in sensors, and other physical technologies. We are calling this advanced manufacturing. In parts of Europe, it's called Industry 4.0, it's called Industrie du Futur, it's called Smart Factory. There are different ways you can describe it in the spirit of having a neutral term that is not connected to a particular national context. We're calling it advanced manufacturing. And why is that so important? It's because this is what will allow us to produce faster, cleaner, and cheaper in the future. It's how we will manage these incredibly complex integrated global supply chains that are used in technology products. And it's how we will shift from mass production in the previous industrial age to mass customization, where the product can be tailored depending on the individual needs of the customers going forward. And all of this at the same speed and the scale as we were able to previously mass produce. The demand for these technologies is global, and the transformation is happening worldwide. And we know that the markets that will master this will have a long-term competitive edge. And I like this example that I'm showing here on the page from the World Economic Forum, which looked at the future of production readiness across global markets and ranked the countries depending on how well placed they were to take advantage of this transformation. And of the 25 top markets that are going to benefit from this, 18 are in Europe. So here is a unrivaled European technology strength. Ironically, we are concerned that Europe is wasting this potential because the US and China, they have understood how important this is and they are catching up very fast. And that is currently not sufficiently on the agenda at the European level and across the member states to make sure we take advantage of this opportunity we have. So putting our finger on how we can do that in the most effective way, this is what our discussion really is about today. And I'm delighted to now introduce you to our speakers who will help us shine a spotlight on how Europe can take advantage of these opportunities and create a new generation of technology leaders. And I would ask all the speakers to put on their cameras now. In the spirit of being neutral, we have shown the speakers in alphabetical order on the slides. Let me slightly change the order in which I introduced them. So very much welcome, first of all, Christiane Cannenblay, who is the Deputy Head of Cabinet of the European Commission's Executive Vice President, Margrethe Vestager, who, of course, you all know. And in the Cabinet, Christiane has oversight of Europe Fit for a Digital Age and also industrial policy. So really perfectly placed for our discussion today. Very much welcome you, Christiane, to our discussion this morning. And then we have two distinguished speakers from the industry to help bring the industry perspective. And first of all, let me introduce to you Ute Törschke, who's Managing Director at Elchucom. Elchucom is a German SME that is focused on producing ultra-thin wire. So we will talk more about this in a moment. And Ute brings a deep background in technology, including time in Silicon Valley and working for HP, and also serves on the board of ZVEI, the German Electrotechnical Industry Association. Last but certainly not least, Dr. Matthias Bölke, who's Vice President Strategy Industrial Automation at Schneider Electric. Schneider, as many of you will know, is a leading European player in industrial automation and energy management. And Matthias is also chairman of the newly formed Industrial Digital Twin Association. So leading the most relevant topics around the digital transformation of manufacturing. And very much look forward to both of your contribution to help us put technology leadership into perspective. The bios of all the speakers are available for download in the handouts. So by all means, take a look at that. Then let's go straight into our discussion. And I will, in a moment, start with a keynote dialogue with Christiane Cannenblay for about 15 minutes or so. And then the other two speakers will join us for our debate. All of you in the audience are invited to submit questions via the chat. I really invite you to take advantage of this, and we will do our best to take on board the questions and bring them back into our debate. Now, just to make sure everyone is connected and engaged, before we start our discussion, let's run a quick poll. I want to hear from all of you in the audience, and I would like to hear from you what you consider to be the most important priority of the industrial strategy. Now, obviously, these are not alternatives, and many of us would probably say all of the above are important. But if you had to pick one, what would it be? That's what I'm curious to find out. And so let's run this poll, and we'll take 30 seconds or so to collect your results. Obviously, this is not scientific, so we will take it as an unscientific barometer of our audience, but you are a highly relevant audience on this topic, and so the views certainly will give us an interesting perspective. Georgiana, I will let you confirm when we have closed our poll.
Okay, I see more than half of the people have responded, so maybe let's just leave 10, 15 more seconds. Okay, I will now close the poll.
So, perhaps not surprisingly, there's a fair split here from all the answers, but interesting, we have one front runner, which is really making sure we are leveraging our leadership in manufacturing technologies. So that's good to see the level of interest on this. And then also clearly better framework conditions overall being more important than this public sector picking winners here, getting the second highest score. I think we'll keep this in mind for our discussion in a moment. If nothing else, it confirms that the topic we are discussing is certainly on your mind. Good. Now let me go to Christiane Kannenblé, and thank you very much for being with us this morning. You are bringing the official EU perspective to our discussion. And of course, I understand that the industrial strategy update has not been published yet. We were expecting it to have been published already on Tuesday. Of course, now it was delayed. And that to some extent will no doubt affect also what you can share with us. But I hope we will nonetheless get some light into what we can expect from the announcement next week. Now, with those delays in the publication of the strategy, this is now the second time the publication has been delayed. It clearly seems like there's some big discussions going on within the Commission. At least that's the way it's being perceived from the outside. I wonder if you can give us a sense of what those discussions are, and to the extent you can say so, how they are going to be resolved in what is going to get published next week.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks a lot for inviting me here, and also for this very interesting topic. Also for the good introduction. I immediately picked down here some elements which I would like to comment on a little bit later on. But maybe back to your question, which is which we get maybe from many sides, of course, these days. Why another week? Why another delay? I know there's a lot of talking on how difficult it is, etc. Maybe I can just be rather clear. There is no big elementary fight. What we're dealing with here is a huge package. A huge package in so far that we want to get really the facts and figures right on what we're dealing with and how we want to advance. What we're doing is really to update the industrial strategy. Two main points here really. We had the strategy last year, which clearly set out how we see the industry going forward, how we see the role of Europe developing, how we see industry in Europe developing, with a clear focus really on the green and the digital transition, one of the key elements we should discuss today here, and also the clear notion of the open strategic autonomy, which is, I think the open is an important layer there, which we shouldn't forget, and which is in all our documents, be it in the trade policy review, be it in the industrial strategy, and also in the updated industrial strategy. It's really to say, yes, we have our own interests, but of course we also need to have this in an open mind, but really the focus on the green and digital transition and how to make this work for Europe, because we are front runners in many of these areas. So let's make it work. What we've seen now is really, of course, with COVID, there are lessons to be learned from this last year. And therefore, this idea of updating the strategy, bringing it forward, looking at new elements. I think what is obvious for everyone is at the moment really this enormous boost in digitalization everywhere, for businesses, for normal people. I mean, we were all surely 1 year ago not half as advanced on virtual conferences as we all are right now. The boost it gave also even to governments, to administration, really, to digitalize, etc. This is something where we can build on and where we want to build on, but also there are lessons to be learned on how to do this best. The same applies also, of course, for the green transition, which is as important as it ever was, but maybe there a little bit less of the immediate COVID response, but there are two other elements where we really wanted to look at and get the facts and figures right. The one thing is really that we see how enormously important the functioning of our single market is. And I think hardly ever we saw it so clearly than during these first months of the COVID crisis, when we had the lorries hanging at the borders, when the production chains were disrupted, etc. How important it is that our single market works, and we at the Commission did whatever we could really to still make it work. But this is something where, of course, we will look at very clearly in this update and see what can we do better. Is there a need maybe to act more quickly, to act in a different way? The other part is also really to look at dependencies, and that means not only dependencies from our side on our production chain, there are also reverse dependencies. Also, other countries are dependent on Europe on some products. The interesting part is also there, I would say this is nothing entirely new, nothing which wasn't known before, or I mean, that we have a problem on semiconductors is something that we knew 1 year ago as much as we know it now. But what we've seen clearly is there are some areas where we didn't expect it to happen, especially on medical supplies, on pharmaceuticals. I mean, there are elements where we learned, and this of course calls for a better monitoring of the system, a better understanding also how certain sectors are interlinked. We also have to look at, of course, at those sectors which are hit hardest in this whole crisis. This is maybe for today's discussion a little bit less of relevance, but I mean, what the tourism, creative sector, and also the textile sector, I mean, they suffer tremendously, and we need answers for these sectors in order to go forward. So this is really where we are. What I can promise you is what comes with this updated industrial strategy is a tremendous background work, which was really done here with loads and loads and loads of facts and figures, and really getting sort of the basic underlying assessment right. And of course, to keep on going the dialogue with the industry. Because if we don't do this in cooperation and in a good dialogue, we will get nowhere. And this is a little bit what to expect next week. In a broad brush, I'm afraid I can't go too much more into detail. For the rest, I can only recommend a press conference next Wednesday to happen in order to get the details.
Okay, so clearly the fact that there is the required due diligence that is being done, especially on the fact base, I think is important. And we have also from the start said, let's take the time to get it right and not rush something out if it is not ready yet. So I think fully understand and support that approach, and also the dialogue with the industry. And of course, we are part of the Industrial Forum also, with our president sitting there, and have always considered this to be a very important sort of reality check also for the Commission and the member states with the industry. And I hope that we can make full use of the Industrial Forum going forward. So far, there has been one meeting, and of course, only limited opportunity to contribute to this live discussion that is going on now. So I would certainly welcome that to be a core part of the exchange and the dialogue when we get to the implementation. A question on the single market, Christiane, because you mentioned that, and I think that's also been a topic that was very dear to our hearts. We did notice these immediate consequences of the crisis on the single market that were perhaps unexpected, with borders coming up and intra-EU trade really getting heavily affected. A kind of related point on this is, of course, the way the single market is regulated. So the product regulation to enable a single market for products across Europe. And when we see the discussions on the industrial strategy, at least to the extent that they end up in the public domain, there is a lot of focus on these big headline projects, including particular technologies or sectors that are considered to be priority. It feels sometimes like the nitty-gritty work, which is tedious and not very politically attractive, but so essential in terms of making sure the single market works. The the new legislative framework is used to the best effect. The European harmonized standards are used to the best effect. All of those things that are very core to the day-to-day reality for our companies to make them innovative and competitive. That all of this is not so much on the agenda. And I just wanted to understand, is that impression perhaps then not correct?
I would say it's not correct, because I mean, single market is and remains the basic element for European industry really to flourish, to scale up, to be successful. And I think we were very clear also in the industrial strategy last year that the single market is key, and that this needs to work. We also were quite clear there in last year, and we will be that as clear this year again, because this one hasn't changed. It's really, this one needs to be implemented properly, because it's not about adding here another layer. I mean, the first thing for the single market to work is, first of all, that what we have is finally fully implemented. We have launched last year, therefore, this single market enforcement task force, which is really exactly there in order to make things happen. We will follow up again further with member states, really, especially on elements like full implementation and final implementation of the services directive. I mean, these are really elements which we need in order to make the single market work. This is not off the radar screen. Yes, it is tedious. Yes, it is sometimes difficult to get this up and running. And now here the light goes out in the Berlaymont. I don't know exactly why, but I hope you can still see me. I'm sorry about that.
Yes, we can, no problem.
But it is and remains one of our key elements to be looked at, and it will be followed up for sure. I think it's also, especially what we saw over the last month, is also in times of crisis, we might need to work more quickly. And the president already announced in previous speeches that we are looking here also at a single market emergency instrument in order to see how we can act there more quickly. So of course, this is key for success. Absolutely.
Okay, I expect that we will also come back to this point around the single markets later on with Matthias and with Ute, because, you know, again, this is so close to the reality that the companies are dealing with, and also the, let's say, the compliance burden that comes with single market regulation, of course, is an important reality that we also have to deal with. I wanted to come back to the technology discussion, and of course there are a number of particular technologies which have been making headlines. We mentioned the microchips, the connection to you know, supply chain disruptions, particular for the car industry and others. We mentioned next generation batteries. There is hydrogen and clean hydrogen technologies and others that are clearly top of the agenda. From the way I'm looking at it, of course, technology is about much more than the few politically important topics that are making headlines. And the breakthroughs in technology that we will also be discussing later are often less high profile and less visible, but no less important. And so I wanted to connect this to the discussion on the implementation of the strategy and how do we measure success. There's been a lot of talk about, you know, what kind of KPIs would be right and would be relevant. At the end of the day, it's about understanding when are we satisfied that we are successful with this strategy. And I wonder if you have some views on that you can share with us.
Yes, absolutely. No, I mean, it's especially on the technology side, but also on the digital part of technology, which is at the moment, I mean, sort of the key. I mean, you talked here about advanced manufacturing. This is where it all comes into sort of the interplay and really where Europe is leading and where we want to bring things forward. Our idea is really here to come with a four-pronged approach. The one thing is we have this enormous possibility now. First of all, with our overall programs, which we have in the MFF, like Horizon, like Digital Europe, the Single Market Instrument. I mean, there are various possibilities at the moment, really here to drive things forward via Connecting Europe, really to get on the one side, the innovation we need, but also the investments that we need into these areas in order to make it work. And this is now even beefed up by the possibilities we have under the Recovery and Resilience Facility. You mentioned it earlier on. I mean, the enormous amount of budget we're having there. It's not only just a correction. It's not only grants. It's also grants and loans for member states. Some of this will need to be paid back, but it is an enormous boost to the industry. So let's make it work for the future. This is not about rebuilding sort of the old industry as we knew it. It really, we need to use it for the transition, for the green and digital transition, in order to make this future proof. If we learned anything from the last weeks and months, it's really that those businesses, independent of the size, those businesses who digitalized or who invested already in some future technology survived better the last year than the others. And then let's try to go in that direction. So there's really this idea of, first of all, getting the innovation up and running, and also then really following up with the investment we need. And of course, where we have problems there is still to get this at a multi-country project element. If we only look at the recovery, we are pushing the other member states to work together, be it on 5G corridors, be it on some other projects, really to make this happen at a European level. But this is also where we really want to advance. So these are two elements. The third element, which we need then as well, in order to make it a real European technology element, is also the regulation. We come a little bit back to what we proposed 2 weeks ago on artificial intelligence. Again, there we had this double approach. We have the coordinated plan on how to boost really the innovative and the development area of artificial intelligence in Europe together and in a targeted way, and at the same time to have the regulation in place to make sure that the high-risk artificial intelligence applications can be used safely and in line with European values. And that is really where we want to go. So to have these three elements, and all of that then, of course, in constant cooperation and also consultation with industry, I think this is really which will bring us forward. You asked for measurement of success. There, I would at the moment just refer maybe to what we had in the digital decade as some ideas for KPIs and also on how we want to achieve things. In the digital decade, we come with some rather ambitious proposals on where we want to land. And if I may say this here as an opening to the wider discussion, or also with the others, I think we will run into two highly problematic areas. The one thing is still our energy consumption, which will be one of the things we will have to look at in the long run. But this is a joint difficulty, and everybody's aware of it. The other one is really on skills. And there on both areas, the advanced skills, if we really want to lead that on advanced manufacturing, on the technology development, we need, in a way, to reach out to the pupils now in secondary in order really to have the engineers we need in 10 years' time. And that is something where a lot of investment and also sort of awareness raising, I think, is needed from all sides. That's the one part. The other part is also to get the basic skills up and running. Most of the cybersecurity incidents we're having, or not most, but quite large number, comes from the fact of wrong usement of digital tools. As long as we don't get even the basic digital skills as a sort of a basic education requirement, we will run still into problems in applying a secure and safe digital environment and advanced technology. Sorry, that was a bit long, but it's a wide field.
Yeah, thank you. Indeed, there's of course not a short answer to that. Let me pick up on 2 points that you made, the safety and the AI discussion, as a kind of last question to you before we invite our other panelists to join us. And we talked about the proposed AI regulation, and I mentioned earlier that in conjunction with that, there was also a proposed new regulation on machinery. Machinery, of course, being previously subject to a directive, which is one of the big success stories of internal market regulation in our view, that has really contributed to making our industries as globally successful as they are when it comes to manufacturing technologies. Of course, the AI discussion in the public domain has been dominated by things like credit scoring and facial recognition and others, which are clearly extremely sensitive topics. And the industrial applications of AI perhaps have been less center stage, but are no less real. In fact, we see a huge potential in relation to machine learning and the combination of machine learning techniques with production processes and with the machinery and the industrial automation technologies. And we do worry that this new regulation, if not very, very diligently designed and implemented, will start slowing down our capacity to innovate in these fields and to remain leaders in these fields. Perhaps not by design, but in effect nonetheless. And in particular, we had, for example, highlighted the concern that certain industrial applications might be considered high risk and would be subject to a number of new conformity requirements, much stricter or tougher conformity requirements that add a lot of cost, but not necessarily change the safety outcomes. And so this is the sort of the very practical nitty-gritty type of regulation where, despite good intentions, it can actually be counterproductive for our ability to lead this technology in manufacturing. Is that part of is that on your radar screen? Let me put it this way, these concerns, and not just yours, the Commission's radar screen, in a sort of sufficiently present way?
Absolutely. Since 1.5 years, I would say, and even longer, having worked on AI now for 3 years myself. No, more seriously, honestly, AI, I think, is maybe I can go back to one thing. AI is a very good example of how well functioning or how serious we take the public consultations that we do. Because we came forward last year with a white paper on AI with a slightly different approach than what on how to define high risk artificial intelligence systems, where we had a sort of a double layer approach and said this needs to be checked in, and then we have a rather stringent division of what needs to apply really to the high risk and the rest. What we got in the public consultation and in many, many discussions also we had then, of course, with industry, with stakeholders, with also research institutes, etc., was exactly the feedback that approach doesn't work. But why don't you go in that direction? So we have spent here more than a year, I would say, overall, really in discussing on how do we get this right. What we have now is a sort of a pyramid on where to classify the AI systems. I personally, at the moment, don't see that what would be really in the industrial sphere would qualify immediately as high risk. For some of them, we have to see how it works, yes, but I don't see that this was immediately fall into that category. But it's also clear we need to take citizens and along really to trust this technology. And there's still a lot of mistrust the moment it comes. So it needs, the moment we go into areas where this really affects their lives, their well-being, maybe also certain discriminatory elements, the equal treatment of people, we have to be careful. And this is how we designed it. The other guiding principle for us was also not to sort of reinvent the wheel when it comes to conformity assessments or controlling. I mean, we really, especially for every AI which is used in products or in industrial settings, we use existing control mechanisms in order to look it up. So I personally don't immediately would be willing to take that criticism, but more than happy to, of course, to have that discussion then again in a more targeted setting. But all I'm saying here is really these things have been discussed up and down and up and down. So it's no, it is quite clear.
Okay, that's fair enough, and we may deepen that conversation in a different context, of course. Let me first of all now thank you already for having joined us, Christiane, because I know that at 11 your time is up with us, and you will disconnect when you need to. But of course, I look forward to hearing more from you also in the discussion until then. And let me ask Matthias and Ute to turn on their cameras now and join us, because I want to dig deeper into what we heard so far and bring a bit of this reality check from the industry point of view, from those who are really facing the challenge of how do we innovate, how do we keep up with technological evolution every day. And before we get into it, quick reminder, ask your questions on the chat if you like. We will continue to keep an eye on this, and I will start consolidating what I've heard so far to bring it back in a moment. Let me turn to Matthias first, if I may. And Matthias, you, of course, are sitting at the nexus of a lot of this transformation of manufacturing, Schneider being itself an important European champion, global champion in this environment, also with your hat of chair of the Industrial Digital Twin Association. When we talk about technology leadership in Brussels and the policies around technology leadership, what does that mean to you? Where do you see the opportunity to leadership, perhaps also the challenges to being leader, and the strengths and the weaknesses that Europe actually has in this context?
Well, thanks, Malte, for having me. If I have a look on the sector, I mean, this is a super interesting sector, the smart manufacturing one, right? Because we have first a lot of high tech in it. We have a very interesting business environment, business model, and we have a super large scale arena. We talked already about this. And why this? Because in the sector we have equipments, which are sensors, drives, control devices, which are in the machines. Then we have the machines itself, which is a huge sector in Europe. And then we have all these systems, production lines, these integrations of those machines, and again, to produce the goods we are producing. So this is quite an interesting setup for technology, for innovations and so forth. And if you have a look at Europe, I think we have a very strong foundation here, a very successful sector with a culture of export for sure. We have a big leadership situation. We are leading this market, so there's a culture of high tech, a culture of high end, a culture of really innovation in this way. We call it Industry 4.0. It's true. And then we have a promising transformation, and here it comes. I think this transformation is really about bringing digitization in it and having new ways to sell data, to produce data, to sell data. And here we have a culture of, I would say, a big question mark, right? Because the question is, can we deploy those technologies which are on the table today? I'm happy that in the first poll we won, with this question, what should be done, and that's deployment. And I think basically the technologies today are on the table. A lot of things is developed today, and the question is really to unleash now this power and make sure that the companies which are in the sector are really going into this transformation and take this adventure. That's the point.
Okay, thanks, Matthias. That's excellent, because then I will park this word deployment for a moment, and we come back to the deployment part in a bit. I want to ask a similar question now to Ute, first around this notion of technology and leadership, what it even means. And I think Elchucom is a fantastic company to bring to this conversation, because I wanted to also really highlight that technology is not always equal to digital. Of course, digital is everywhere, but there is also physical technology, which is at the heart of this transformation that we're discussing. And your company makes ultra thin wires. I understand they are up to 1/10 of a hair of wires, and they are used basically in all of the high-tech equipment along this value chain that Matthias just described. So, kind of a critical strategic component of allowing all the rest of the technology to function. And I think it's great to have that kind of profile of technology leadership also with us today. So question to you, Ute, as well. When you think about leadership and Europe being best in class in certain fields of technologies, what comes to your mind?
To be honest, this goes back to really the wire that we produce, because leadership for us is to enable our customers to make their products, like Matthias and Schneider Electric, like sensor guys, like the fuse guys in the world. Our leading in technology is enabling others to make the products that they need for their markets. And because you are right when you say drawing wire, this is a craft that is more than 2,000 years old, and there is no modern technology included in wire drawing. But we have today about 85 different kinds of metal alloys, coated wires or coated metals, multiple layered wires. And because the devices that Matthias at his company are making, they need intelligence inside, and the intelligence is coming in from the build up of the wire that we provide. And we actually, you wouldn't believe it, we have about 5,000 to 6,000 products in our portfolio, which are all different and all geared exactly to our customer and to their application. And we are insofar digitalized, and we are insofar using a bit of AI, because we better don't mix the spools of wires that we ship to everyone. And honestly, if you have a tenth of a hair, adding an RFID chip to that is very difficult. So there's a little bit of smart engineering going with it, that we have always a clear traceability and knowledge on each wire that we are making and that we are shipping. So yes, we do have a lot of AI in our production, but the product itself is kind of very ancient and very traditional.
And this is, I think this is a great point. So we have a clear focus within the European policy discussion on supporting uptake of AI, on creating, a data infrastructure and cloud infrastructure, which is better than what we have so far, on creating cybersecurity solutions that are fit for purpose for this connected industrial environment. All of that is happening. In your context, Ute, of course, when you think of technology and when you think of your product, that is all well and good, but in fact, on its own, is not going to be transforming your ability to succeed globally. If I understand correctly, there are other things that ultimately make you successful. And with even the best-in-class cloud infrastructure based in Europe and fantastic cybersecurity, that is not solving your competitive challenges. No,
my competitive challenge is actually that a lot of the component manufacturers that are using our wire are located in Asia. We are one of the unusual companies in Germany that have an export to Asia and not importing from Asia. We have an export ratio of, depending on the year, between 70 and 80%, most of that going to Asia. So we are struggling. We have competitors throughout the complete world, typically not for the complete portfolio, but for certain parts, for certain products. Typically the bit bigger wires, the less complex metal solutions, but there is competition. And a lot of companies for price reasons and are compromising quality, compromising technology, and pick like a copper wire, which is not functioning the same way because it's cheaper. They say, yes, we would be willing to pay a little bit more, but it's so cumbersome to buy your wire and import it. We are willing to work with shipping times, with delivery, because we know it's custom manufactured, we know that, but the bureaucratic effort to transport the wire from X to Y, like from Falsdorf to Beijing, for example, is making some customers hesitant, and which makes it difficult for us because we have to cope with all those regulations throughout the world and the companies and the countries we work with, and we have only about 80 people, and I have to dedicate one person to cope with all logistics, customs, which is way more than a normal company our size would need.
Okay. With an eye on the time, Christiane, if I can turn to you for one last round of comments, and of course anything you would like to add to what we just heard. But the question I have is, was anything you heard surprising or unexpected for you? Is anything different from the conversations which are taking place as you're thinking about the new strategy?
No, it's always good to get the exact examples, and that is the good and the interesting part, and it's also why we need to talk and why we need these exchanges and really to listen to each other. No, I think I haven't heard anything which is sort of surprising or new. I think there's a huge area where we really all need to work on, and that is better data sharing in a safe environment. The difficulties of administrative work when it comes to trade, I think, is omnipresent everywhere, and will not easily be solved. I mean, but it's also maybe one last word from my side, and then unfortunately I have to switch off. I would really like to stay, but we need also to be clear where can policy help, and where should we rather leave things really to industry to innovate. I mean, I don't think that there's any interest here in sort of defining everything policy-wise. Also, what are the areas where innovation needs to take place? Where do we need to invest, etc. It's also for the recovery and resilience plans, etc. What we said is we need to invest in digital, in green, and then indicated some areas where we see some urgent need to look at it, but it's up to member states, to regions, to the industry itself, really to define what needs to be done. I think that's important to keep in mind, that not for everything which is not working immediately, it's like, please, Brussels or whatever policy interfere. I think what we've seen in the last year as well, really the innovative capacity of industry and also of certain businesses to adapt immediately, to change the business model within a few weeks and months. This is wonderful. This is really great to see, and there's no need for us to intervene then. So it's really to get also here the balance right. Where do we really need to intervene? Where do we invest? Where are also we better leave the market to find the best solution, and also really to use the huge innovative potential we have in Europe. I mean, we are leading in this area. Your slide in the beginning showed it very clearly. Let's work on that basis.
I think this is a great way to reassure also our audience. Many again are from the industry, about the way that the Commission is approaching this. I think that will be an important message for all of us to hear, because sometimes this is not coming through enough in the way it's being discussed in the headlines. And I think I fully share the analysis that leaving the industry to do what it does best needs to be an important part of industrial strategy. I promise, Christiane, that I will capture whatever we discuss in the follow-up, and then perhaps we can reconnect, and at least I can share with you the rest of our discussion as well. And thank you again for taking the time to be with us this morning.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Now, I'm really happy that we have some time today to get a bit deeper into the discussion. Often with our events, we realize that we can't do justice to the interest and the questions which are coming from the audience, and also the depth of expertise that we have with the speakers. So I want to take advantage of that today. Before we go into let's say the second round, let's run our next poll. I want to again bring all of you in the audience back into our discussion and help stimulate us a bit. And so let's bring this up in the context of what we have just been discussing and hearing. Again, let us know, where do you see the particular needs for Europe to actually intervene or step in, as opposed to, as Christiane just said, letting industry get on with it. So where do we see the need for the state and the EU to take proactive steps in supporting the industry? Georgiana, I will let you run and then close the poll.
Thanks, Malte. I think it's taking a bit of time to actually read. I see answers coming in slowly. So let's give it a bit of time.
And again, these, of course, are not meant to be mutually exclusive. So you would be forgiven for saying that they are all important. But it's always interesting to see if there's one that stands out, which one is it?
And I see most of you have voted already, so I'll leave just 5 more seconds for those of you in the process and then close it. Okay.
So that's a much clearer picture than we had in the first round, with a similarly sort of open question. Very interesting. And again, clear focus here on the transversal technologies, similar to what we saw in the first poll, with really deploying the advanced manufacturing technologies which are transversal across different industries. So here, I think we have a surprisingly clear picture, as more clear than I was expecting. And then leveling the playing field, of course, another important topic that perhaps I'd like to come back to in a moment with our distinguished speakers. So let's bring Ute and Matthias back. And I wanted to pick up now on the keywords that Matthias threw into the discussion, which was deployment. And again, starting with the hypothesis that a lot of the technology is already here. By the way, the same goes for a lot of the clean or green technology as for the digital or smart manufacturing technologies. But we are not satisfied with the speed at which this is being deployed. And I wanted to hear both of your views. Where is it getting stuck, and how can we get it unstuck? Whether that's through the right policy mix or other things. Well, so Matthias, I'll ask you first.
Okay. So I think we need to maybe to clarify a little bit the field in which we are. I mean, if I look at at smart manufacturing that way, I see at least 3 different points where we will see in the next 5 to 10 years really big steps, right? The first field is, I would say, in the technology of the products we are producing itself. So that's about nanotechnology, that's about additive manufacturing, that's about producing things which are on the molecular level. I think we are good here in research and also in applying things into the machines. That's okay. The second part is, and it comes here more tricky, we are digitizing a lot of those areas, and we are digitizing the core. The core means that this is the control of the processes, the control of the machines. So you have here basically all those developments as AI, as machine learning, as implementing digital twins. That's something where we, for sure, we will have to accelerate, and we need to be faster. But the third area is, I think, the biggest one, which is really the new ecosystem, where we are integrating much more data now, data from the supplier, data from our customers. So this is a horizontal integration of data, where also we are starting to selling data, to each other, having industrial data lakes to deal with. And when we talk about transversal, and this was a poll again, I would say industrial data really are special, right? They are special because first, in the ecosystem of industry, we have a lot of different suppliers with still a lot of different kind and structure and formats of data. So when you integrate all those data in one machine or in one production line, that's a hell of work. And this structuring of data is not really, bringing a lot of value to us. But today we have use cases where 80% of the energy and also 80% of the budgets often are still used just for making order clearance, scaling those data to bring them on a level to an industrial data lake where you can deal with. And the second why industrial data are so special is because we have real-time requirements. Those data are not everything is in the cloud, because we are very close to the machine, very close to the process. So we have a topology which is quite typical for industry. Data in the cloud, data on the edge level, and then data decentralized in the machines. So, and that's why I think, Malte, that's so important to, to be a little bit more specific on what we talk about. And these data are going to be even more complicated and difficult in the future. On the other hand, we want to speed up digitization, so we have a problem. One example of this to simplify those data is really digital twin. So you already introduced the topic. We are now really focusing on building a digital twin in Europe, a kind of standard digital twin, so that those complicated world of industrial data are easier to use. So that's and that's all about collaboration. We are sitting together. We come to this certainly later, but I just want to highlight this: that collaboration and hardware agnostic. Those things are really important if we want to move forward.
Okay, and indeed, I do want to come back to the digital twin in a moment. I just wanted to insert here a question from Jos van Jersel in the audience to you, but I would ask the same question also to Ute, because I think it's great to hear both of your views on this, which is, if we do accept that basically all the technologies are, or many of the technologies are fairly mature and are already available, and we are just trying to put the finger on where is the obstacle to a widespread and fast deployment. What is your sense of the awareness among the companies? I guess your clients, Matthias, and in the case of Ute, potentially a client or part of the value chain of a client of those technologies. Where is that awareness today? And what else can we do, all of us together and the policy makers as well, perhaps to accelerate the awareness that's needed?
You see, when you look into a SME, a small company, you deploy that what you need and that what you can afford. You don't have the resources to it. I know there are a lot of fancy things out in the world, and there are a lot of things we could do, but we need to focus our resources on what is really driving business success. So our digitization of the wire manufacturing started, or let me say, at least 10 years ago, before anyone was thinking about it, because we needed it. If you make a 8-micron wire and you don't know what it costs you to make it, your sales price could be very wrong. You could be quickly not very profitable, because such a wire can range in a kilogram price somewhere in between 10 and 20,000 euro. If you're wrong there with your numbers, you are hurting. And then if you have 10 tons of material, 15 tons of material in your storage, all on spools like this size, and you try to make inventory, believe me, when I started working for LQCOM, it took us 3 weeks to finish inventory once, and we had discrepancies of high 2-digit number ranges. Today, we finish a software-driven inventory within 15 minutes, and we have discrepancies of below 10 grams and below 100 euro. So this was the effort we took was forced on us by business need. And so far, we have not seen for small companies incentives that you really implement those new devices, new technologies, the digital approaches. It's difficult to choose the right one for yourself. for your company, and then afford to implement it, because these new technologies come at a price. So you really have to pick and choose carefully. And a lot of companies, size of L2Com, need more support, more information, more communication to be able to pick what is already available in the market.
Thank you, Ute. And maybe I can make a connection here, Matthias, with a discussion that we had earlier this week in our new executive forum for advanced manufacturing. So Orgalim put this in place in order to allow a deeper exchange and collaboration also among the industry on these topics, in order to be better able to shape the right policy framework. And one of the discussions that came up by a number of the participants was precisely this: how do we also better pinpoint where's the kind of the business case, the ROI, that may not be self-evident and that may not be kind of immediately visible from a short-term commercial or financial perspective, because some of that is hidden. Matthias, I wonder if you can give us a little bit of your sense of how you would frame this towards someone like Ute, who is, who needs to look at her reality, and that may be more limited than what is possible.
Absolutely, and I come back. One part is that the industrial data world is complex, is complicated, and that we have these requirements which are not on the same level on the B2C data, for instance, where we have all those easy use apps and so on. So we are in a more complicated environment. On the other hand, I think we need to be much more explicit in existing use cases and in solutions we did already in the industry. There's a lot of things which are done, not visible, and we need platforms. So you just talked about the platforms at Orgalim we will use, and we will certainly emphasize on, to make sure that solutions which are today there are seen, are cultivated, are replicable, and therefore I think we have not enough of these platforms today in Europe to make transparent what kind of things are possible and what does it take to do it and to replicate it. I think this is key. Again, if I see on our customer base, there are, I see daily unbelievable things which are realized today, which are full aligned with all what we said now, with all the buzzwords. So there is real digital value creation already in place. And again, we are using this in the company really, to, when we go to customers, we show this what happened and what's possible and what's reality today already. With tested and validated applications and architectures and so on. But I think on the global scale, on the market, we should have this culture much more in the next years to show practical ways to replicate and to copy paste.
Okay.
I apologize, Malte, if I jump in here, because I would really stress that point what Matthias is saying, and this is why organization like Orgalim or the ZVEI are so important, because they can offer this communication, this information, and hooking up companies, because this is not about competition or any unfair or illegal information sharing, but this is really a good table to bring players together. And this is why I appreciate, this is why I'm engaged in the ZVEI as myself, because this is really the platform why I do get the data. And this is where I do find the Matthiases of the world to help me with my efforts. So I apologize for interrupting, but wanted to
get by all means. And of course, indeed, that is part of our role. I wanted to pick up on the poll earlier, where we talked about leveling the playing field, and that was also, part of the concerns or the priorities that you in our audience expressed. And a lot of the discussion on leveling the playing field has to do with some of these new instruments that the EU is developing, like on foreign subsidies, on procurement, on investment screening. But I'm very conscious that for a lot of our companies, and especially, again, the mid-sized and the smaller companies, there is another dimension to a level playing field, which simply has to do with the way the the high rules in Europe are being consistently enforced, consistently applied by the market. And I wonder if in your context and in your day-to-day reality, that is something that you're struggling with, that you feel you are competing with players, perhaps based in Europe, perhaps based outside of Europe, who are not operating to the same standards, full compliance standards that you are doing as good corporate citizens, and that therefore they are getting a kind of an unfair advantage because of this extremely heavy compliance burden, which of course we do have in Europe. Is that is that part of your reality?
Let me put it this way. I do not want to judge the ethics of other companies in the world. I think I trust that everyone is working in their business and their environment, in their legal area, the way they are supposed to behave. But we notice different levels of requirements and compliance approaches with the countries we operate with. And I think the intent behind a lot of these tools and regulations are good and the right approaches. So I don't want to question that. I'm sometimes just worried why we have to do some work triple or quadruple times for the same, more or less similar goal or intent. This is really causing us to increase resources to fulfill those requirements, which I know that some competitors do not have to do because their governments don't request or require that. And it would be good when you look into regulations that have a good reason and that have a good intent. It might be very worthwhile to check if there is something similar already out there in the world to combine efforts and not to duplicate efforts.
Okay, indeed, there is that that challenge also of being a global player based in Europe that has to respect, of course, a much more complex and burdensome set of regulations than other parts of the world. Matthias, do you want to add anything on this before I come back to the point on digital twin?
Yes, and frankly speaking, I believe that's all about how you are you good in leadership, yes or no? I'm in my company. We decided more than 10 years ago to focus everything on sustainability and on green and digitization. Right? We tripled the company since, so we are now a 30 billion company, a truly global player, and this was an amazing time. There's a big growth, and I just can tell you, I mean, we have done this with a big set of ethics and a very good cultural environment where this is attractive to people. And if you have such standards in the company, I think you can lead, and being truly global, for sure, we respect local situations, but also we lead with our culture and with our ethic behavior, right? That's one thing. Another one, more technical. I just said that we have complex data in industry. We need to, to consider this all and bring it to an easy way of application level. Just let not overcomplicate then, regulations on data and trade of data. Just let not overregulate this here in Europe, because this would then be a disadvantage in the world.
Okay. That's an important call to action to also the colleagues from the policy-making community, which are with us today. I wanted to bring it back to the digital twin. Matthias, you had already mentioned that earlier, and out of all the different technology breakthroughs that are transforming industry, this is probably the one that most captures the potential. And again, you are also at the nexus of this with your role as the chair of the Industrial Digital Twin Association. I wonder if you can, first of all, help us in the audience who may not be that familiar with it understand what is that, the digital twin, and why does it matter? And perhaps where can the policymakers make a difference also with respect to the digital twin in particular, either by doing more or by doing less?
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, I repeat again, we have a complex set of data and we want to simplify it. The digital twin is a perfect mean to take out complexity of data, because you deal then with something which is much more prepared to kind of apps to using those data. We know digital twins from a long time, especially in the engineering. You know, we all know those pictures, 3D pictures, where people are looking with AR lenses, and you can then simulate the product before it is even produced. You can change, you can innovate, and so on. It doesn't cost a lot because the product itself doesn't exist yet. That's one application we have since long time in for instance, in the building of turbines, or also in architecture. Now we have a stage where the digital twin can do much more. We take those data from the engineering part into the real construction world. Then we take those data in the commissioning. Then the product gets in use in the machine and in the production lines. So producing data, IoT data, we are taking these data as well in the digital twin. And then we have, all this maintenance of the product, and until the end of the life of the product, to the recycling, all those data which are connected to the life cycle are represented in the digital twin. And if a digital twin is well done, you have a set of data regarding this product, or regarding this process, or even for a factory. You can use them for a lot of different kind of applications, right? I take just one example. If we will see, production as a service in the future, where you have a product, you want to produce it, and you look for an adequate production line somewhere, maybe in Europe, right? So today, this is a deep research you do, and there's a lot of travel, a lot of negotiations, a lot of things. With digital twins, we have all for instance, the production line with all the parameters, with all the different functions in the production line, we have digitized in the digital twin. And if you have the product, you do a digital twin of your product as well, and then you can have a matchmaking on cloud level. So you won't have people flying around negotiating pricings and lots, and that's then smart contracting. And that's what we are pushing now, that we have use cases where those data from assets are taken to simplify the applications. So with the IDTA, which is this association, we just went live a month ago with a lot of participants from the industry. Again, a supplier, OEMs, but also end user. For instance, Volkswagen is part of the founding members. We are using a concept which was developed in Europe since, I would say, 4 to 5 years already. And this concept is already in use cases. We call this asset administration shell. Asset administration shell. This is this digital twin concept. We are using this concept now really to launch it to the market, to make it available, and so that everyone who wants to do a digital twin of his asset can, contact us, can have a look how to build this digital twin according to this kind of standard, and then he is, compatible to the system. And this will be like a Lego, and then this complexity of data will be reduced a lot.
So for anyone who has not heard much about digital twin or asset administration shell so far, expect to hear a lot more of this as we really see these manufacturing technologies.
And again, this association is, Malte, just to say that this association is just built, and we will go with also international press conferences now to make it known in Europe first. We want to make it truly European. We have 60 companies which are already knocking on the door to be member. Everything is ready. We did the IPR, which is very important because we are working open source. So this is a real collaboration world. It's not protected. It's not hidden. It's really open. So the people which are joining us have everything is in place. Just sign the IPR and then come with your workforce, and you can participate at this project.
So perhaps may also be of some interest for others that have joined us this morning to look more closely at this.
Maybe.
I want to start slowly wrapping up our discussion, and in a moment I will ask Ute and Matthias as a kind of final closing thought. What is the one thing, the one message you would like to convey to the policymakers? Because at the end of the day, of course, this is a also a political conversation that we're having. You know, we will then, of course, take that on board also in our own work. Before I ask you this, let us do our closing poll, because I want to hear your thoughts from all of you in the audience. If you look forward, what's your degree of optimism about the direction that we are taking? And so, you know, very simplistic 3 options. We are on track in Europe to create the next generation of global technology leaders. Some adjustments needed, and then we really need to go back to the drawing board. And so let us now run this poll, just to also leave a closing thought from all of you in the audience. So as always, Georgiana, you will let us know when we are ready to come back.
Yes, we're waiting a bit more. I think 60% of the people remaining have voted. We're aiming for a bit more. So final seconds to cast your vote, and then let's look at the response, which seems very clear. Okay, I'm closing.
Now I'm excited. Okay, so no big shock here. It would have been almost strange if we had a clear majority saying everything is fine, and this speaks to my heart as well. Clearly, there are still some adjustments needed. I'm sure we don't all agree on what they are, but more work to do. That's why these conversations and also the Industrial Forum and other ways for all of us to contribute to the policy process are so important. So I think that's a very clear signal that we will take out here. Now, let me ask for my closing thoughts from Ute and from Matthias, and I will have to ask you to be fairly short on this. If there was one message that you would like to convey to the policymakers who are holding the strings on all of this, what is that? And let's start with Ute.
I'll try to roll up my 3 thoughts into one message. First is I'm located in East Germany, and we had state-directed economy before. We do not want it again. We know how it works, and it didn't work. So whatever you did in the past, I mean, past decisions are done and gone, but there were not always the best decisions. So I would appreciate if politicians in Europe learn from their past mistakes and improve in the future, and listen to like nature calls. Fridays for Future is a good idea, but I suggest, and people might hate me for that, go to school on Friday and learn physics and engineering to really learn the technology that can help improve nature and the world. And we need politicians to support on us, listen to the people and help them to achieve their goal.
Thank you, Ute. Very clear, very powerful point. Okay, and Matthias, final thought for you.
Again, I think this sector, smart manufacturing, is a super successful sector in Europe. We are leading a lot of fields there. Now we are going into this transition of digitization, where I think the industry is able to do it. Just don't overregulate and don't bring the speed down, but bring it up, and bring it up by more collaboration. We are going to standardize a lot of things to make usage of data easier. As I said, just support the standardization of the industry, which is going to happen, and support collaboration across companies and across also technologies.
Thank you very much, Matthias. So clear call to action on both fronts that we will take on board. And with this, all that remains for me to do is to thank our speakers, Ute, Matthias, and of course, Christiana also earlier. That was extremely fun for me, and I hope it was exciting and fun for all of you in the audience as well. And thank you to all of those who joined us this morning for your time and your contributions. As always, you will have a quick poll if you want to give us some feedback as you disconnect. And then please don't hesitate to remain in touch with us via our website, or of course contacting me if you have anything on your mind. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of the day and speak to you very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.